Tom, I think that the theme for this festival is very interesting. It certainly resonates with me because it suggests that maybe we should be looking at wellness also through the lens of sustainability. And so today I'd like to, and also the fact that that it is a huge industry. Today I really want to talk about the why and the how of wellness in the workplace, because I think that if we understand what's driving this $3.7 trillion industry, and also what's driving it from the point of view of the end users, this will help us to, it'll certainly help to inform how we do it and how we do it properly. And I think also that it's very important for us to understand that there can be an environmental cost to all this wellness. So just a show of hands real quick, what's driving wellness? Why are employers suddenly so concerned about the well-being of their employees? Do you think it's mostly like altruism and true corporate social responsibility, or do you think it's mostly bottom line, profit driven? Who thinks it's A? Who thinks it's B? Well, I think that there shouldn't be any shock or surprise about that, because that's what business has always been about. There are actually two main reasons for wellness and well-being in the workplace. And the first one, there we go. The first one is to attract people who have the best knowledge, the best skills, and to retain them. And to do that, we offer them a workplace that's cool to be in. The second reason is to help people to work better, faster, more accurately, and not call in sick. And neither of these reasons are altogether to do with altruism, and all of them both of them have to do with maximizing what we call human capital, the value of the human brain power that's associated with an enterprise. And if you want a good definition of human capital, you think of it as the sum or the stock of the knowledge and skills, including creativity and technological know-how, the personalities, the work habits, to perform labor, which will produce economic wealth, which will produce economic value. And if you compare human capital to other forms of capital in an enterprise, such as the raw materials and the machines and processes, the robotics, the real estate, and all of that critical infrastructure that you need to do business, such as energy and transportation networks and artificial intelligence. If you compare or contrast the role of human capital is needed to drive all of that. And there will come a time, no doubt, when a lot of that human capital gets replaced with artificial intelligence. But for now, it still takes human brain power to run the show. So whether you're trying to attract people with the best skills and knowledge, or whether you're trying to get people to work better, faster, more accurately, more efficiently, and not call in sick, what you're doing is trying to maximize the human capital, the human brain power. So how do you do that? Well, it takes two things. In the workplace, and actually anywhere, it takes a certain level of physical well-being and emotional well-being. So let's take a look at these real quick, starting with the physical well-being. We are like any other species that operates better, that thrives in an optimal environment. And for humans, our optimal environment includes clean oxygenated air. It needs certain thermal conditions of temperature, humidity, air movement. We need certain quality of light, certain wavelengths of light at certain times of the day to trigger alertness and to trigger sleep patterns. We need certain acoustic conditions to help our brains or to enable our brains to focus. We need a certain amount of space in which to move and not feel invaded. We need to be able to relax the body and rest the brain. And for all of these factors, there are known and prescribed ranges of environmental performance under which humans function better and our brains operate at their best. And I can give you an example of that. You take a workplace like this, and you change nothing except that you now start pumping in fresh air and removing the carbon dioxide and the VOCs and all the other noxious compounds. Productivity and brain power, if you will, goes up measurably in terms of problem solving and speed and accuracy. And the same can be said for daylight and light quality and thermal comfort and the arrangement of space and acoustic conditions. All of this is measurable. It's very scientific. It's being studied like crazy. Unfortunately, not many people actually understand it very well. And so not surprisingly, much of the focus tends to be on the emotional requirements and the recognition that there are certain positive emotions like satisfaction and engagement and a certain affinity or affection for one's colleagues and happiness and fun. And the recognition that these positive emotions result in more productivity, more creativity, more ideas, and more of a willingness to share our brain power with our colleagues in what is known as collaboration. The power of positive emotion in the workplace is huge, especially if you compare it to the negative impact of negative emotions such as frustration, insecurity, boredom, stress. So which is more important, the physical or the emotional? Well, I'm going to give you a little scenario, okay? So you've got 2 job offers, and the salary is the same, the hours are the same, the commute from home is the same. The difference is this. In one of these jobs, you've got an environment that satisfies also those requirements that I was talking about, and it's a pleasant environment as well. The problem with this is that the job itself isn't that exciting. It's acceptable, but it's boring, it's stressful, it's a little bit frustrating. The organization that you're working for doesn't relate to any of your particular, personal values or anything. Your colleagues are a bit standoffish, you haven't anything much in common with them, and your boss is a bit of a micromanager. Okay, so that's job A. Job B is in a garage or a basement, not very comfortable, but it's a kind of a cool job because it holds personal meaning for you, and you have a lot of autonomy, you're empowered to make a lot of decisions about your own job and about the enterprise itself. You feel yourself growing, you feel yourself pushing your boundaries, you're making an impact, and you're feeling really connected, and you have a good chemistry with your colleagues. Who wants job A? Who wants job B? Yeah. So clearly you need both. You need the physical to meet the physical requirements as well as the emotional requirements. Now I'd like to B, I forgot. B is engagement, right? A is if the job is okay, you're going to be satisfied. Okay? But in situation B, you're going to be engaged. And for employers, engaged employees are the lifeblood of the organization. They're the ones that work with passion. They feel a deep connection with the organization. They go the extra mile to deliver. They're the ones that win the accounts. They maintain client loyalty. They innovate. They drive the organization forward. And in addition to that, they take fewer sick days and have fewer safety incidents. So it does take both. It takes the physical and the emotional. So I'm going to run through some of the physical things real quick. So we talked about indoor air quality. We want clean air. We want thermal comfort. If we're too cold or too hot, we're definitely not as productive. And if on top of that, there's some little things about the job that we don't like that are irritants, then being too cold or too hot is probably enough to not make you even want to come to work anymore. We need daylight and views. We need that biophilia, and we need a certain quality of light and visual ergonomics to avoid dry eye and headaches. Layout and acoustics, they tend to go together very much nowadays because of open offices. And you can just see some of the improved productivity that you get when you take corrective action when you have poor acoustics. There's this idea that open offices are good for collaboration. That's sort of been the rationale for open offices. In fact, a recent study from Harvard came out just in July, confirms what I think many of us have suspected, which is that when you cram a lot of people into an open office, the natural human tendency is to avoid face-to-face social contact. And so in a situation such as on the top one there, you're going to people tend to prefer to communicate by texting and email, even though their colleagues are just a few feet away. So if you're going to do an open office, you got to provide enough space and different neighborhoods within that open office so that people can choose where they want to work. Ergonomics, anyone who's had repetitive, a carpal tunnel or anything like that, you know the importance of that. So if you fix some of the problems associated in these areas, you can get huge improvements in productivity. What about wellness programs? Do they work? We know that healthy employees are more productive. The question is, if you have unhealthy employees, will a workplace health program help them to adopt healthier lifestyle and habits? It really depends on the program. If you have a one-time fun run, that's not going to really move the needle. But a good wellness program, which has health screenings and ongoing monitoring and access to exercise and good advice on health, that can really make a big difference. And perhaps even more importantly is that employees like them, so it satisfies a bit of an emotional feeling there. Now, we said a few minutes ago that if you're engaged, none of that matters. You don't mind working out of a drafty garage. There's a really important caveat there, which is that after a while, you do mind a very great deal, actually, because if there's anything in the job that's irritating, or that you don't start, you're not too satisfied, being in an unpleasant office is going to add a huge level of irritation to it, and can really bring about a sort of a deterioration from being engaged to being actually actively disengaged. It's really, it relates quite well to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which, if as you recall, suggests that there are certain basic human requirements that must be satisfied and are prerequisites before we start moving to the higher levels of human fulfillment. So in the workplace, let's say you've fulfilled all of those basic requirements that I was talking about, that are physical requirements, as well as safety and security, including job security. Doesn't mean you love the job, but job security. If you've achieved that basic level on Maslow's hierarchy, what does it take to meet the emotional requirements in the workplace? There's a wonderful acronym that I wish I would have come up with. It's called MAGIC. And what it stands for is meaning. First of all, meaning that there should be some aspect of the job that has personal meaning for the employee. Autonomy, which is empowering employees to make certain key decisions about their jobs. Growth, which is about recognizing the skills and achievements and successes of employees and providing them feedback and encouraging them to push their boundaries and grow. Impact is showing employees how they are personally making a difference to the big picture, to the enterprise. And finally, connection, which has to do with connection with the organization and colleagues. So what that means is that engagement is not about bringing Wonderland into the office. Because after a little while, all of these perks start to lose their thrill, and employees then start to want to look for the magic, the higher meaning. So, in other words, it's not about bringing in a ping pong table to make people feel more engaged. Rather, it's about training managers to be better leaders, to be better mentors, and to create a workplace environment, a workplace culture where people can find the meaning, the autonomy, the growth, the impact, and the connection. And that explains why a company such as Google, which is a wonderful employer, has a turnover rate that's just the same as anywhere else of about 1.1 years, because in a very large behemoth organization, it's hard to be able to provide that kind of, to meet those emotional requirements, because it's large, it's not like a startup. So these emotional things, requirements, are they not the job of the enterprise to provide that? Because we as real estate professionals have very little influence over people's jobs. There are certain things that we can do in the workplace to help to satisfy these emotional requirements. And the two that come to mind are autonomy, which is providing an environment where, especially if we're talking about open offices, where people can choose at least where they're going to work, where they're going to sit, and making it varied, having sort of neighborhoods within that open space that provide a variety. That's a huge thing that you can offer employees to help satisfy quite a key aspect of autonomy in the workplace. The other area is connection. And there's connection, of course, professional connection, which means that you've got to provide good meeting areas for meetings of all different sizes, even if it's just, talking with one person, providing a place where they're going to have some acoustic and visual privacy, perhaps, and being able to connect with people who are off-site with up-to-date telecommunications. But just as importantly in today's workplace is to provide opportunities for social connection. There's a huge epidemic of loneliness out there. It's a society-wide sense of isolation and loneliness, which apparently studies show is especially acute among professionals in their 20s and 30s. And it's not surprising, really, because nowadays people have to move around so much. They have to move to study and to work, and that makes it very difficult to keep alive old friendships and nurture new friendships. And although we're hyper connected on social media, most of our communications is visual. It's pictures of people having a wonderful time at parties and eating delicious food in trendy places. And it's enough to make a lot of people feel, lower their self-esteem and feed their loneliness. And so what do? They throw themselves into their studies and into their work and to make up for that loneliness. And as a result, they have even less time to connect in real face-to-face friendships. So for many people, the workplace is where they get the most of their face-to-face connection. And one of the best perks that you can provide in the workplace is free tea and coffee, because people spend about $1,000 a year, on tea and coffee. So providing good quality tea and coffee and a convivial place to chat is an excellent way to, first of all, you keep them on site. You get them alert and stimulated because of the caffeine. And at the same time, you provide a good opportunity to blend work and play, where people can talk shop at the same time as they're developing camaraderie. And be sure that you don't use disposable cups and non-recyclable coffee pods. So how do you measure workplace wellness? Well, you can have checklists and certification systems like WELL and FitWell. Typically, you measure the physical aspects of it with measurements, physical measurements, and the emotional with surveys. But now, with smart buildings, you can measure anything with a great level of granularity. You can measure lighting, you can measure the solar, you can measure everything pretty much. And when it comes to the emotional, the sophisticated biometric devices now can, measure where people are, what they're doing, who they're talking to, and you can even measure something about their emotional state just by the timbre of their voices, and all of this can be done in real time. Time permitting, yes. Do we? Yeah, I've got time. So what's the cost of this? In particular, what's the environmental cost of it? There's a tendency to assume that sustainability and wellness are somehow magically linked, that green buildings are always healthy and that healthy buildings are always green. And this is a myth. You can have a green building where you cram a lot of people into a space and reduce the heating, cooling, and ventilation, and the acoustics are horrible and the ergonomics are horrible. That's not healthy, it's not comfortable, it's not productive. You can conversely have a healthy workplace with 13-foot ceilings and floor-to-ceiling glazing with tons of fresh air and lots of daylight and heating and cooling to keep everybody totally comfortable. That can be an energy hog. So it is a balancing act. And I'd just like to come back to that example that I gave earlier, where we said that if we increase the ventilation, we can, we can really, really increase productivity. So Harvard did a study where they did that. They increased the ventilation by 50%, and then they increased it from building code, and then they doubled it. And what they found was that the increased productivity per employee was equivalent to approximately $6,500 per year. And that the additional energy cost was just $40 a year. And if you wanted to be really, really efficient, if you have your most efficient HVAC, then that's only $18 a year per employee. Well, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? But let's keep in mind, though, that even $18 a year per employee is more energy, more carbon. In fact, I just did a back of the envelope little calculation. It's like between 4 and 8% more energy. That's quite significant. The good news is that we have the technologies to bring that convergence between energy efficiency and carbon reduction and wellness. All of these things that we've been hearing about today, we can do it. We have the technology, and with smart buildings, that convergence can be brought together even, at a very low cost and a very high return on investment. So there, you can have you can optimize your building systems as well as enhance the human experience. I think what concerns me the most, what I think is the greatest environmental cost to wellness, is attitudes, because as we said, we've got all the technology to do it. In my experience, I've developed a little system called Green and Productive Workplace, where we measure the green aspects of the workplace and the productivity aspects. And we give a score for the green and a score for the productivity. And what I'm finding is that the scores now are going up, 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 up for productivity, but they're not, but the green isn't getting the attention that it deserves. A few years ago, I was in the first class of WELL APs, and I'll never forget a conversation that I heard in the lunch line. There was a lady who was talking to her gushing to her neighbor, and she was saying, "I just love this wellness stuff. It's so interesting. It's so much more interesting than lead and sustainability. That was boring. This has personal meaning for me. This is so much sexier." And you know what? She was right. Wellness is a lot more interesting and a lot sexier than climate change. But climate change isn't a fad. It's not a fashion that we can walk away with, and I don't need to tell you that. But for a lot of people, it is. And I wonder if there will not come a day when artificial intelligence starts to replace human intelligence, starts to replace more and more of that human capital. And there may come a time when, as you see in this illustration here, this is an office in Japan where most of the office is in darkness because it's been replaced by artificial intelligence. So for all we know, this wellness might be a bit of a passing fad. I'm not saying it is, but we don't know. But meanwhile, climate change will still be with us. And so I feel silly here preaching to the choir, but I do feel that we have to be very, very careful and that we don't sort of forget about greening our workplaces as we focus more and more on the productivity. I, for one, wake up at 3 in the morning and think about climate change, and I would love to have grandchildren, but I'm so terrified about their futures. So anyway, on that cheerful note, let's not forget that buildings are a huge contributor to climate change. Tom asked us to make sure that we had takeaways, so I don't know if I need to read them to you, but anyway, it's about maximizing human capital, and productivity is greatest when both the physical and the emotional requirements are being met. Employee engagement requires both. Engagement is largely an enterprise function because that's at the level where you can really start to increase the magic. But the workplace does contribute, and primarily it contributes, first of all, the physical requirements, but then as well it can contribute to autonomy and connection. There can be an energy and carbon cost to all this wellness, so we have to be very vigilant about that. And smart buildings, among some of the other technologies, and I've learned about new technologies that I'd never even heard about today, can offer something of a magic bullet that brings about a convergence between sustainability and wellness. Thank you very much.